And hello, Next Gen Millionaires. How are we doing this week? I'm Joe Burns, the Money Master, bringing to you the money tips of the week. Um, what a great week it's been. For those who saw my video last week, I want to expound a little bit off that, right? So I want to just dive in today and talk a little about some things I saw also. So if you go back and watch last week's video, I talked a little about I went to and taught some high school kids about entrepreneurship. And I always like it. The basis of the class was entrepreneurship, right? But I wove in my money magic in it, um, because really, if you look at all the things we do, right, and look at the passion, and there's a theme. Like if you go back a few weeks, right, I talk about passion, I talk about money stories, I talk about a bunch of these things. Um, right, we start to build this idea of what we want for life. Now, it dawned on me last week when we were talking to when I was talking to these kids. Uh, that when the question came up, I'm like, hey, what do you guys like? What are you passionate about? What are you doing? Like trying to like just provoke some thought and some good discussion that was happening. And at first it was like crickets, right? It was pretty bad. um, but then just kind of like pressuring me, like asking the other questions and just like trying to provoke the thought, right? Trying to get them to think up here in their heads and share. Now I understand it's a classroom setting, so they have their peers there, right? And they're like, oh, my peer, people in their same grade or in the other grade, because it was a mix of like 16 to 17-year-olds, right? So like juniors and seniors in high school. Um, so there was that kind of pressure on them, and some of them like kind of raised their hands when I asked about a passion. It's like I don't know. Teacher called one student out about because she had a passion. Another kid kind of piped up, um, and that was the story about the ducks. Um, but I want to look at this right and go back for a moment and the real thought of today's live stream and what I want to talk about, right, is really about curiosity being a gift. Um, I think we look at curiosity a lot of the times and we kind of like, oh, why are we asking so many questions, right? I get asked like, I know I took a lot of flack for that growing up, and sometimes I still do as an adult, where people are like, oh, Joe, you ask a lot of questions. Like, why are you peppering me with so many questions? Right? Why do I gotta answer this right? And I start to trigger people, and it's not on purpose. Sometimes I just want to know. Sometimes I have to dive into my question asking and be like, hey, why am I asking questions? Right? I got to be honest with myself, as I think all of you should be as well. Right? Be honest with like, why are we asking the questions? Are we trying to prove ourselves? Sometimes I am, not on purpose, but it's kind of the default. Like I want to show myself as intelligent and that I'm like should be at this conversation, and I want to add to the conversation. So I ask questions that sometimes don't fit in. I've done that plenty of times. But think back to times in your life, right, when you've been asking questions, what's the response you get? Right? Because there's an energy about us that when we start asking questions, our ulterior motives are really brought to light, even subconsciously. Right. And people pick up on that. Even if it's not consciously, they pick up, they're like, man, why is this guy like, it gets uncomfortable sometimes. But other times, think about it. Think about the situation you've had. Sometimes the question asking is uncomfortable, but sometimes it's a lot of fun. Right, so that's where I go into the curiosity piece. Like, are we showing up curious when we're asking questions? When we're looking for our passion, right? When we're wanting to know about somebody else's passion or what they're doing or how they are, right? Think about the questions we ask in interactions and networking events or just on the daily. Are we really being curious about what the answer is? Or are we just being polite and asking the question anyways? This is the kind of conversations Debbie and I have had over the last week. It's been interesting to see what's come out from it, right? And then as my brain started thinking and kind of diving into like, what's the energy behind being curious? What's the energy behind us really, truly wanting to know an answer versus us just being polite and asking, right? When you ask somebody that you probably don't really care about, how you doing? When they respond back with how they're really doing, you're like, whoa, that's too much. Okay. See how we respond to this? So let's look at money. Let's get, I guess, now let's look at the difficult conversations, right? Where it's obviously about money, right? Money is one of the most difficult conversations I want to talk about. But I want to really talk about money. I want to talk about racism, politics. I want to talk about some of these hard subjects today. Because I know that if we go in asking questions about these tough subjects with curiosity, without preconceived notions about what we want to get out of it, that we can truly show up and learn, then we're going to get a lot out of those conversations. Even if we have differing opinions, we're still going to walk away as at least acquaintances or people we still like. I wouldn't say friends because it might not be a friend you're having the conversation with. But if we look at money, right, and this is what I talk about, like if we go back and we look at our money stories, if we look at other people's situation and look at them and without judgment, but be curious about where they're at, how would that change the outcome? Think about that for a minute. Are we going to be pissed off and mad at money still? Right? Because the story is something that happened. But if we can be curious about looking at what happened, right, and processing the emotion, not letting the emotion get in the way of clouding our judgment. But if we could really look at it with curiosity, then we could really find creative solutions to solve our problems, especially when it comes to money. Especially when we look at our money stories and like all the things they trigger inside of us. It's like, oh, I don't want to look at that. Most of the time we're covering our face like this, like, no. Right? We don't want to look at it because we know there's a lot of tenderness and a lot of like trauma there. Right? All these emotions come up. We're like, what do I do with these emotions? I don't know. But if we can be curious as we go into that conversation, then we can be open for a new perspective. Same with like racism. We look at racism. It's the same thing. If we can have curious conversations and challenge our own beliefs in that conversation, how would those conversations end up? How can we look at the systems put in place to hold people back and start challenging them? Not in a way of like, oh, they're horrible, evil. Most of them are. But in a way of curious about like, oh, what's a more creative solution? How can we create equality for people in a way that's truly equal? Right? What happens if we enter those conversations with curiosity to try to understand the other side? To try to put ourselves in those situations and be like, huh, how would I respond? But if we look at politics, same thing there, right? Told you we're going to talk all kinds of controversial topics today. But what happens no matter which way you are, right? And what you believe in politics, what happens if you reach across the aisle with curiosity and not just with an agenda of what we feel is right or wrong? Because at the end of the day, our perspective is everything. And if we don't challenge our perspective with curiosity, we'll never grow as human beings. We'll always be stuck with the constructs and the boxes that we put ourselves in. People ask me all the time, Joe, how can you help your clients have such good results? I help them be curious. I help them challenge the stories and the constructs and the boxes they put themselves in or other people have. I help them challenge those perspectives that they have about money. And when I do, they have miraculous results. I'm not even call them miraculous anymore. Like it's like a process. And if you follow it, you get results. Like it really is. There's no miracle in this. So I'm going to take that back. It's proven. And I've proven over and over and over. Because I help people be curious in what they're trying to discover. There's no judgment. Right? We're not like, oh, I hate that part of me because blah, blah, blah. No, be curious. Why did I do that? What's happening there? And I promise you, when you take this stance of curiosity, right, it's really a gift in the end. If we can look at it that way. If we can be curious and really just want to know why things are the way they are. How did we get here? Then we're going to find answers lots faster than if we're like, no, it has to be this way. Now you got to prove me wrong, right? Proving energy never gets us anywhere. Well, it gets us in a lot of fights and breaks up a lot of relationships. I mean, if that's what you want, that's what you're going for, keep going. But if you really want to change where you're at, if you really want to change what is in your future, you got to be curious. All these preconceived notions about yourself, about other people, you got to drop them. Drop the judgment. It doesn't help you. What's going to help you is being curious. Really using your questions to say, hey, why are we doing this? Help me see your vision. If you work with other people, somebody gave a client last week, like really challenged to be like, hey, I'm bored with you for this next idea. But why are we doing it? If it doesn't make sense to you, you're not going to get on board. But come from a way of curiosity about like, hey, how does this fit that bigger vision you want to do? right? You can do that in your own life. Create your vision plan, right? Write up on a piece of paper and be like, hey, here's where I want to be the next 2 years. That's a cool vision. And then find out like all the things that are kind of stopping in your way, right? And what you can deconstruct. You can start like looking at it and be like, oh, I know these things are getting in my way. I know I'm going to stop here. And ask yourself why. Why is that a thing? Not to like get down on yourself, right? But really just to be curious about like, I wonder why I act that way. And every time I step into my curiosity, I always find out something new about myself. And it's pretty cool, right? I can start to challenge the things I have done. Like I can't go back and change them, right? Experiences have formed who I am today. But guess what? If you had met me 5 years ago, I'm a completely different person I am today. Right? If you can go like 7 years, right? In the last like, especially 10 years, things are completely different. Because I've asked myself why. I've been curious about my own inner journey to try to understand it better, to understand myself better. And as I've done so, then the world started to change. I make more money now. I have way better relationships with people, and I'm living my best life. Like I think it's a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. So if that's what you want, right? If that impact you're trying to create and that legacy you want to leave behind, if that's what you really want, then you got to be more curious. You got to start asking more questions. And you got to ask those questions from that space of curiosity. Like you want to know because you really want to know, not because you want to prove them wrong or find out where the flaws are in their systems. That doesn't get us anywhere. Okay. So this week, your challenge is be more curious. Be more curious in how things work and how you show up in the world and what's happening in your businesses, what's happening with your money. How do you feel about it? Be really curious. Like I tell people all the time, talk to your money. Be curious. Ask it like curiosity questions, like you're meeting it for the first time. How's that going to change your relationship? Right? Think about this differently. Because as you do, then inevitably the byproduct is more money, more connections, more confidence, more trust in ourselves, because we know we're coming from a place of true intention, not just to prove people wrong. So change how you're doing it. Change what you're doing, and you're going to see results on the other end. So if you got any questions, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching today. And if you got any, like I said, questions, drop them below. Send me an email. You can find out more from me always at josephmburns.com. And have a great day. See you guys.